Good evening. It's good to be with you. We are going to look here at John chapter 18. We are continuing the thought of Jesus, really the final instruction to his disciples and in telling them about what the kingdom and the church should be and what they should be. He had just finished telling them that they should be one, like he and his Father is one. There's to be no division. But there is one Lord, one faith, one God, one baptism. We see that he is teaching so much. He even prayed to the Father. He said, I pray, Father, that they might be one. And then he continued basically preparing them for the kingdom or the church as we know it. He here in 18, a lot of people don't realize what he does, but he's going into that. In 18 verse 1, it says, Then when Jesus had spoken these words, he went and with his disciples over the brook, and then he was there in a garden, which with him and the disciples had entered. It says, And Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. And remember, Judas had left them at the Lord's Supper. He had left them, and they had went their way. It says, Then Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priest, went, and the Pharisees, what did he do? He came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. And Jesus, therefore, knoweth all things that would come upon him, went forward and said to them, Now notice here, a bunch of crowd coming to him, the torches, the weapons, and all this. And Jesus did not go back, but he went forward from the disciples. He went out forward and said to them, Whom are you seeking? Whom are you seeking? He knew who they were seeking, but he went out, and they asked him, and they answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus said to them, I am he. And Judas, who betrayed him, also stood with them. One of the apostles said that one of the writers, Matthew, said that he went up and he kissed them as a sign. He kissed him. How to imagine this. A bunch of soldiers came up to arrest a man. And they had somebody that was going to kiss him to say and recognize who he was. But before the man could even kiss him, Jesus walked up to him and said, I am he. Who are you hunting for? Jesus, I am he. I don't think they could have hardly believed that, but then Judas confirmed it with the kiss. And it says, and when he said this, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. I don't believe that. And then he asked them again, Whom are you seeking? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I have told you that I am he. Therefore, if you seek me, let these go their way. He said, if you seek these, let these go their way. He said, I am he. Let that the disciples was with him. And it says, he did this, that the saying might be fulfilled, which he spoke. Of those whom you give me, I have lost none. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his ear. Now this is what he drew the sword and cut off his ear. Now, I would say this. What was he doing with the sword? Well, first of all, Jesus wanted him to have a sword. A lot of people say, what? Jesus had to prove to his disciples what we find just a little later he said to that leader of the Romans. We're going to find he says later, he says, my kingdom is not of this world. If it was of this world, then I would fight. But before he told the Romans that, he had to show it to his disciples. This is why we see in one of the other books, in Luke 22, in Luke 22:36, there he asked him, he says, do you have a sword? He told him, he said, if you don't have a sword, sell your coat, go out, buy a sword. This was this very night. Why? Because he had to show them. In verse 38, they finally said, well, here is two. And Jesus said, that is enough. They had we know they had two swords with them. But you know, he had it there so they wouldn't be able to say, well, if we would have only had a sword. I could see Peter's and the others saying, if we would have had a sword, we would have. Well, the sword was there. They drew first blood, but Jesus told them to put the sword down, and he even healed that man whose ear was cut off. Why? To show them and to show us what Jesus was here for to do. He was here to die. He was here to show that his kingdom was a spiritual kingdom, a kingdom not of swords, but a kingdom of love and goodness to all men, and to teach us also to be that type of person as he is, to love. And then Jesus said to Simon, put your sword into the sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which my Father has given me? Basically, I have to drink this cup of death. He said, it's here. You have to let me do it. It says, then the detachment of troop and the captain of the office of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. And they led him away to Ananias first, for he was the father-in-law of Cepias, who was the high priest. So here it is, the arrest. And yea, they let the others go. I find this fascinating. These men, they were shocked by Jesus stepping out saying, I am he. And then they was shocked when they found out that the man kissed him and it was he. Then they were shocked because one of the men picked up a sword and cut off the ear of one of them. But Jesus stepped in, sword play stopped, and put the man's ear back. You know, there had to be, Brother Kelly, can you imagine the feeling that night they had? They was doing what they was told to do, but they saw that which they could not believe. I think we set in the groundwork. Jesus set right here the groundwork for the kingdom later. I think we see here why on the day of Pentecost when Peter spoke, there was 3,000 that obeyed. I think we see why a few days later, there was 5,000 men. Then we can see why later it says there was multiplied both men and women. Why? Because I think not only these disciples, but also the soldiers and the servants of the priest. That's why in chapter 5 of the book of Acts it says, and many of the priests even also what? Believed. Because Jesus lived, he practiced, he forgave, and he died for all of mankind. And he showed compassion for all of mankind. And he can show it to you if you only will look, believe, and change and follow him. God be with you till we meet again.